It is vlog 225, and we are coming right out of the gate with a hand that involves something that has definitely never happened before. It would come the day before most of the action on this vlog would ultimately take place. I'm in the winner's straddle, middle position 2. The dealer deals me one card, and then, after dealing everyone else their cards, fires the second one over to me at an extremely fast rate, so much so that the card flips over, exposing the Jack of Diamonds. I look at the other card, which is the 3 of Clubs. The rest of the cards then dealt out, and then I would be the last player to get one more card, and it would be the 3 of Diamonds. So I end up having pocket 3s. Under the gun limps in, as does the button. I check my option in the straddle, so with 40 in, the flop comes 8, 10, 3 rainbow, and it gets checked to me. I just bet out for 15 here, looking to build a pot with my set of 3s. Both the big blind and under the gun limper make the call in this spot. So with 95 in the pot, the turn is another 8, filling me up. Big blind checks. Under the gun now is betting out here. He makes it 75. I'm certainly going to raise. I make it 250, thinking there's a good chance this guy has an 8, and I'm going to be able to get his whole stack. Without a second of hesitation, the big blind 3-bet check raise jams all in for about 800. Under the gun still gives this some thought before ultimately laying his hand down. Now, as for what to do here, I certainly didn't think the big blind would just limp in with pocket 10s here, so the only hand I really had to worry about was 10-8, which I figured he would raise with on the flop. With top 2 pair, it only makes sense. So certainly with my 3s full of 8s, I'm going to be making this call here, creating just under a $2,000 pot, and he does have 8-10. After I thought about it, I wasn't exactly surprised that he wouldn't raise that on the flop, given the fact that I'd bet out there. I don't think it was done as a trap. I think it was done out of legitimate concern that I had that exact hand, because this particular opponent tends to rarely ever get his chips in without the nuts, and this was just another example of that. So I would lose this massive pot that I never even would have been in had that jack not been flipped over and simply been dealt to me as it was intended to. Now, look, I know this could have just gone the other way, where I was dealt the best hand when I wasn't even supposed to be in there, but that didn't happen. And as a result, I booked a massive loss to start the week, and that is how this vlog gets started.
Now, once in a while, I suppose you could check back here with Queen 10. It almost kind of plays like a delayed double barrel, where, you bet the flop, you actually take a card on the turn, and then if you don't make it and the pre-flop raiser checks to you, he probably doesn't have an ace, and he's probably capped at a weak ace at the most, and then you bet the river, and you make your hand look like it's just like, ace 7 or something like that that's going for value.
Cruising on in for vlog 225, listening to the latest episode of the Crush Live Poker Podcast. This is one of those episodes that just kind of made me think, that's why I started listening to this show so long ago. That was Bart Hansen at his absolute best. Truly phenomenal episode. And if you are a Crush Live Poker subscriber, and maybe you're just there for the videos primarily, listen to this one. You will not be disappointed, I can guarantee you that. And if you're not a Crush Live Poker subscriber and you're interested, you can always get 25% off for life just by going through the link in the description below. It's the only thing I have ever bought that's paid for itself, and then some. Got beat pretty bad last time out, so hoping to improve upon that today. I got the Cup in 6 shirt on. Not sure if you can fully see it here, but it was one of those things that many of us Golden Knights fans wanted so badly to buy, and we had the opportunity to do it after owner Bill Foley said before they ever played a game they were going to win the Cup in 6 years, and I'll be damned if they didn't deliver on that. So if I can't book a win wearing this shirt, I don't know what the hell shirt I can win in. The earlier portion of the week had been fun. I had the chance to see the Smashing Pumpkins live near Thunder Valley Casino in Wheatland, California, and had the chance to go to a local Dragon Lights festival with my dad and my son. As for this session, I'd show up at Peppermill at 2 p.m. right as the second 0-5-10 game was set to start on table 5. I'd buy in for $1,500 and clock in on the Bink app. I'd start out on tilt after opening pocket 6s to 30 and getting 3-bet to 120 by the only guy in the game against whom I wasn't sure how to proceed. Later evidence would tell me it wouldn't have been a bad idea to call him, given how many hands he was capable of 3-betting. But at the time, I thought 6s was a little thin, so I opted to fold. But since another player didn't, I'd get to see the flop where, as tends to happen, I would have indeed drilled a set. I'd quickly relocate to the other table, featuring a lot of the names you know and love from this vlog, local legend, Mr. Z, as well as the Pro MC, Reno Grinder, and one of the Double Ds. Also sitting next to me was a guy with a championship ring, this one coming for DC United when he played for them back in 2004. What position did you play for DC United?
Wherever they put me.
Wherever they put you.
Mostly defender.
Mostly defense, but you could score a goal when need be.
I have a few in my day.
I'd waste no time getting in a hand against Brian. It would come playing 7-handed when I'd get dealt ace queen of spades under the gun and raise to 35. He would defend the rock MP1, and the cutoff would call as well. So with 110 in the pot, it would come 10-7-3 rainbow with 1 spade. With good backdoor equity and a chance of still having the best hand, I made it 50 here. MP1 thinks about it for a minute and calls with the cutoff going out. So with 210 in, the turn is the 7 of spades. So I do pick up the nut flush draw. But the problem is my opponent is going to have some 7s here, and he still might not fold a 10. I figured I'd find out though. I bet half pot, making it 110. He thinks about it for a second and calls. So with 430 in, the river is a complete brick, the 4 of hearts. If he wasn't going to come off of a 10 on the turn, it seemed like that was a pretty bad river to try and make it happen now. So I just give up and check, and he says, "You got it." But obviously that's not going to be the case all that often, as he shows pocket 9s and takes the pot down. I'd get on the scoreboard raising pocket 5s and actually getting 1 street of value out of them on a 10-10-4 flop before taking the pot down 1 street later. This next hand is one that I honestly felt like I was going to lose on the river. It began with a $40 raise from a grinder under the gun, and then a tight player up big on the day would call from the cutoff. I have 7-8 of hearts on the button and make the call as well. So the 135 in, the board comes out 9-4 deuce 2 hearts. Under the gun bets 90 here, and the cutoff doesn't waste any time calling him. And obviously, I'm not going anywhere either. So with 405 in, the turn is the 5 of hearts, giving me the flush. Under the gun now checks, and I was expecting the cutoff to check most of his range here as well, but he doesn't. He bets out for 100. Now, this player is not one to pay me off lightly. If he doesn't have a set or a flush, he's probably not calling a raise. And I don't see him not raising a set on that flop in a 3-way pot. So I just call here with under the gun folding. And with 605 in, the river is another 9. Once again, I'm expecting him to check. And once again, he doesn't. He bets out for 100 again. Now, obviously, he doesn't have a full house or the nut flush with that sizing. But I have played so many hands against this player over the years that I am confident that if I raise him here, he will not call with less than a flush. And he tends to rarely ever play the hands that would make the smallest of flushes. And knowing him, he could easily have the jack high or 10 high flush here and play it like this. You often see in poker guys, when they should raise the river, justify not doing so by simply saying, oh, he wasn't going to call me anyway. But in this particular case, there is some truth to that, because with this opponent, I feel like he's basically never calling me unless I'm beat. So I just toss in the chips, creating an $805 pot. He shows a hand that I certainly didn't expect, but wasn't stunned. Pocket jacks. So it's not going to go down in my highlight reel, but it is one of the bigger pots I would win on the day. I lose back $135 set mining against the Pro MC when I had pocket 10s. I would fold on the flop and he would show pocket aces.
Hey guys, I'm over here just enjoying my ice cream and the incredible cards that everyone has put so much time and energy into. Peppermill has so many wonderful things to offer. I like this card show. There's some amazing food here, like funnel cake and kettle corn, and of course ice cream. What's your favorite summer food?
By the way, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that Kayla doesn't eat a ton of funnel cake. That's just my take. Anyway, over the next 2 hours, I am not kidding when I say I never had a single pair. A lot of ace-king, king-jack, and king-queen, but not one of them ever improved to a pair. So I went from being up $100 on the day to being down $400 without any hands of significance. I did pick up my favorite pair once again. Reno Grinder with limp under the gun, 8-handed, and the low jack raises to 40. A pro on the button makes the call, and I have pocket 8s in the big blind and make the call, as does Reno Grinder. So with 160 in, the flop comes queen 8-4, 2 clubs, giving me middle set. I check, and the original raiser, the only guy in the game I don't know at this point, bets 150 and it folds back to me. So, should I slow play this bad boy or raise right now? The $150 sizing felt to me like he wanted to get a lot of folds. But would he really bluff all three of us here? I wasn't sure. With most players I would be sure, but with this guy, I wasn't. So when in doubt in spots like this, I figure it's always best to just fast play the hand. So I raise it to 325 and under the gun folds. The low jack thinks about it for only a second before folding as well. I don't see any way that he had an overpair, given the speed of that fold. Another hour would go by without me getting any hands worth playing. It was about 10 o'clock, and the other half of the double Ds had also sat down in the game. By the way, he had gotten super unlucky in a hand in which he turned a full house, and his opponent rivered a bigger full house in what amounted to a $7,500 pot. But regardless of that, and you never hear me say this, if you look through the game, and I'm about to discuss this more in depth in a minute, but the game had 6 winning players in it, if you count me. And the other 3 weren't exactly giving money away either. One of them just won that massive pot and probably was going to go on lockdown. So, as much as I wanted to try and turn this session into a winning one and get more content for this vlog, staying in this lineup would make absolutely no sense. So I announced that I'm booking a loss and no one can stop me, and sure enough, no one did. A $392 loss in this session. So a couple of back-to-back unfortunate vlogs where I just didn't get dealt the best hand too many times and ended up booking a couple of losses as a result. But the good news is I do have a good question of the week. All right, wrapping up a pretty miserable week here poker-wise for me. Down just a little over 3,000 for the week. But I wanted to get a question of the week in here. If you're new to this channel, hit the like and subscribe buttons if you could. Also follow along on Instagram at bendeach. If you ever want to submit a question, you can do so in the comments below. I tend to go through those, and I don't always answer them all in the comments themselves. I just like to look for ones that are particularly interesting that I can actually discuss on this channel. And we got a good one. It came in from Bert after the vlog I shot in Cherokee, North Carolina. He said, Ben, I'm curious to hear on your first ever visit to Cherokee, how you can just sit down in a game and determine who's a grinder and who's not. You used that term several times. What do you base it on? Thanks. It's always very important, I've felt, to know what you can about the people you're playing against. What do they do for a living? Are they retired? How much money, in a general sense, do you think they have? These are all questions that, in all honesty, I usually know the answer to when it comes to my regular game here in Reno. In fact, I pretty much know that for like 99% of the player pool. There's one guy, fuck it, I'm just going to mention this guy. This guy was legendarily named the Forehead. And the guy who gave him that nickname, I'm not going to point out, but I know he's watching. The Forehead is like the only guy that ever plays in this game And I have no clue what this guy's deal in life is. He seems like he's a grinder himself, but I don't believe he's nearly a good enough player to actually turn more than a $5 an hour type profit. He seems to show every indication of a guy who just like lives in an RV in the middle of nowhere. Like there's just nothing. I mean, he's shown nothing to indicate that he's ever had any sort of career or anything to go along those lines. So he's mind-boggling. But he's the exception. If you get to know the player pool, you'll know like, oh, this guy is a doctor. You know, this guy is a lawyer. This guy is a news anchor, you know, whatever it might be. But particularly when you get up to these kind of 5-10 games, you're going to be seeing a lot of guys who you realize don't have jobs. And that doesn't always mean that they're a real threat. But, you know, generally speaking, that's going to mean that they're a winning player. And before I get around to pointing out what you can look for to know these kind of grinders, I just find it particularly interesting that pretty much all of these guys that I'm talking about that I see in my games here have something in common. I mean, I've mentioned Reno Grinder. You know, he's a little bit different, but you talk about the double Ds, the guys who I would say are the two best players in the player pool and obviously haven't had jobs really ever in their lives. All they've done is play poker. What do those guys, Reno Grinder and several others, all have in common? Yeah, they all have wives whose health insurance they can get on. I just find that interesting. Even with the guys who support themselves entirely just by playing poker, they almost always still have wives taking care of the health insurance for them, not to mention probably some other bills. So keep that in mind if you're mulling over this decision to quit your job or not, which I certainly would not recommend regardless of how good you may be. But what do you look for in these grinders? Generally speaking, they tend to be younger guys, not always. We just had one in here a couple weeks ago that was probably in his late 50s that was as good of a player as you'll ever see in the games here, but as unself-aware as anyone could possibly be, and is just incredibly obnoxious to have in the game, but that's neither here nor there. Usually they're younger guys, bringing in a backpack, pretty good sign of a grinder. The way they handle their chips, you can always look for that, but a more reliable thing to look for is how deep do they buy in? This is one of the ultimate things that I've noticed. If a guy buys in for a rack of red, chances are he's a recreational player. If a guy buys in for the table maximum, if there is one, or if there is no maximum and he buys in for $5,000 and he buys in for a stack of $100 chips, there's a pretty good chance that guy's a decent player. If a guy buys more green chips than red chips, probably a good player. If a guy buys nothing but red chips, probably not that good of a player. You can look for other things. If a guy goes broke and he walks over to the cashier to get chips, rather than just saying, have them bring me these chips, they're probably a good player. And certainly, and if a guy is just sitting there on an iPad watching videos the entire time he's in the game and just waiting for aces and kings, he may or may not be a profitable grinder, but please, for God's sakes, don't give him any action.
I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer. Rising the song to the highest bidder. Got juice, got gas, I'ma move fast. New shoes, new tracks, like who's that? I'm new, come back, better than last. Yeah, it's a new me.